I'm not sitting here today because I perfected this crazy little thing called love, but because love is ultimately where the Gita is trying to take us. And so I want us to explore this together with open hearts, however bruised or scarred they may be, however full or empty they may seem, and however hopeful or hopeless we sometimes feel in our pursuits to connect to love in ourselves and with each other. When I first got married in my late 20s, I had spent the previous 10 years of my life single, celibate, and very strict in my day-to-day routine and commitment to doing inner work and spiritual practices as a monk. And the majority of my personal relationships were with other men trying to help each other stay single, celibate, and very strict in our day-to-day routines and commitments to doing inner work and spiritual practices as monks. So yes, having no prior experience in long-term relationships or any type of romantic relationship whatsoever, other than the 2 girlfriends I had in high school that each lasted a few months, I was going to transition from monkhood to marriage. Needless to say, it was a steep learning curve. I had spent my entire adult life up until that point trying to love and serve humanity, and now I was tasked with trying to love a very specific human. One of the biggest adjustments I saw myself having to make when I made that transition was understanding that there are different types of love which we share and experience. And real quick before I launch into this topic, I want you to know that I've had my fair share of struggles with love. I'm not the perfect husband, and my wife and I would both tell you that every couple at some point wonders if they chose the right person. Because we have an expectation of other people to feel something in us that is far above their pay grade and far above ours as well. In fact, I spent several of the early years of my marriage in Al-Anon ACOA meetings, which are relational 12-step programs for people with codependent tendencies and behaviors stemming from unresolved family dysfunctions. Because as I tried to love and serve one specific human, I came face to face with all my ugly limitations, ego fixations, and misconceptions about what it meant to love another person, or even receive love from another person. We are still learning. I am still learning. And I'm not sitting here today because I perfected this crazy little thing called love, but because love is ultimately where the Gita is trying to take us. And so I want us to explore this together with open hearts, however bruised or scarred they may be, however full or empty they may seem, and however hopeful or hopeless we sometimes feel in our pursuits to connect to love in ourselves and with each other. And if you have a heartbeat, I can bet that you've experienced heartbreak, whether it be romantic heartbreak, friendship heartbreak, family heartbreak, spiritual heartbreak. There's a lot of heartbreak. And statistically, we know that a lot of relationships don't pan out. The average American adult has been through 3 major relationship breakups and has spent more than 1.5 years of their lives getting over them. Divorce rates are going down, but so are marriage rates, because a lot of people just fear even going there or wonder what's the point. John Gottman, founder of the Gottman Institute and one of the leading researchers and authors about making successful relationships work, describes what he refers to as the leading indicators and eventual causes for relational breakdown and eventual destruction. Borrowing a biblical reference from the book of Revelation, Gottman calls these breakup indicators the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Criticism is defined as an attack of the other person's character, usually beginning with the preface, "You're so," fill in the blank. "You're so annoying. You're so arrogant. You're so lazy. You're so selfish." By the way, never once in our marriage have my wife and I told either person, "You're so," fill in the blank, and the other person pauses, reflects deeply, and says, "Thank you. Thank you for pointing out my blind spot so that I can be a better person." Maybe I'm just doing it wrong, but I've never gotten that result. The next one is contempt, or the expression of superiority that often comes out as sarcasm or name-calling or a mocking sense of humor. Many of us grew up in homes where jokes were a covert way of putting somebody else down. And we just carry that right into our adult relationships in a way that undermines the very fabric of healthy personal connection. The third is defensiveness, which is a form of self-protection that can come out as self-righteousness or being the victim. When my wife and I first got together, we shared things about ourselves that we thought would be important for the other person to know. I let her know early on that I was never wrong, nor did I ever plan to be, because I figured that would come up at some point, and I wanted her to know ahead of time. And as silly as that sounds, I didn't do that. How many of us struggle to admit when we're wrong, or at least that we had some part to play in something? And the last is stonewalling, which is after all the other three horsemen build up to a point of overload, there's just withdrawal and a sense of defeat or apathy that things can be fixed. And while we can dissect these things and look at all sorts of statistics, reasonings, and explanations of why so many relationships struggle, the Gita sums it up quite simply when Krishna speaks to Arjuna, Yedam dharyate jagat. There's a limit to how much anything or anyone can ever fill our cup. And without knowing, we spend so much time trying to squeeze out something from people, something that will never give us what we're looking for. I love the way C.S. Lewis sums it up when he says, if I find myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Because if none of my earthly pleasures satisfy it, that does not prove the universe a fraud. Probably earthly pleasures were never meant to satisfy it, but only to arouse, to suggest the real thing. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand me as saying that relationships are useless, love is a false hope, and that I made a mistake getting married. What did I do? I should still be a monk right now. I've actually become a more full and complete person because of the relationships I have in this world, most especially the one with my wife. We just need to reframe our approach from thinking, this is meant to give me love, to this person is here to help me learn to love and connect back to the source of love. This is why material relationships without spiritual connection leads to personal frustration. Our relationships to each other are like the spokes of a bicycle wheel. The connection is through the hub. And unless we remain connected to our common source, it's easy for us to just scatter apart. And we quickly realize in relationships our limitations to love. The practice of bhakti as taught in the Gita, Shraddhavan bhajate yo mam, the last verse from the previous chapter, chapter 6, is where we tap into the source of love that is within us, so that we can more maturely, sustainably, and meaningfully engage in love with other people around us. I mentioned earlier that there are different types of love. There's physical love, which is based on the body. Family relationships fall into this category. We share the same genes, the same blood, and therefore I love you. Sexual relationships fall under this type of love as well, where I'm attracted to another person physically, and there's a pull that brings us together. That love can be flickering if there's not the additional presence of the next type of love, which is emotional love. Emotional love is based on how we feel about someone or how they make us feel when we're around them. You make me feel safe. He makes me feel beautiful. I just feel alive when I'm with them. There's something related to our emotion that feels positives and creates a bond between just the physical. Sue Johnson, a clinical British psychologist and couples therapist, says this in her emotionally focused therapy guidebook, Hold Me Tight. Quote, if I appeal to you for emotional connection and you respond intellectually to a problem, rather than directly to me, on an attachment level, I will experience this as no response. This is one of the reasons that the search on social support uniformly states that people want indirect support, that is, emotional confirmation and caring from their partners, rather than advice. So experiencing love on the level of the body, This is my son, this is my husband, this is my brother, sister, grandfather, doesn't have to be wrong. It just simply ends up incomplete without the layer of emotional love. But even emotional love can get tricky, because as soon as I stop feeling the very feeling that drew you to me in the first place, it's as if the spark is gone. I fell out of love with you. So love based on the body and based on our emotions still has a component missing. It was Marshall Rosenberg, the creator and founder of nonviolent communication, one of the most effective and popular tools for meaningful human dialogue ever developed, who once gave a seminar on the meaning of love. He fabricated a conversation between people where one person asked the other, "Do you love me?" Actually, one of his characters was a giraffe and the other was a jackal. Of all land animals, the giraffe has the biggest heart, biologically. So he liked to use the giraffe when communicating stories. So it was the jackal who asked the giraffe the question, "Do you love me?" The giraffe paused and looked back at the hyena, or the jackal, and said, "Well, that's a pretty big question. Let's make sure we know what we're talking about when we say love. Are you using the word love as a feeling?" "Well, of course," the jackal replies back. So the giraffe says, "Okay, good to know. Love for me is a need, but I'm glad to be clear that for you it's a feeling, so you can ask your question again." The jackal says, "Do you love me?" And the giraffe says, "When?" The jackal says, "What?" The giraffe explains, "Well, feelings change. Life is changing. How am I supposed to know how I'm going to feel in a given moment? If you want to know if I'm going to feel something towards you, I need to know when." So the jackal says, "Right now." And the giraffe says, "No." And when we base love on a feeling, it can often be a very confusing ride, which is why the final type of love, the love that Krishna is trying to point Arjuna towards, and all of us towards, is spiritual, which naturally includes all the other types of love within it. When we understand the deepest expression of love to be a function of the soul and the need of every living being, in order to have healthy, sustainable relationships, we need to be clear and aware how much and to what extent we and other people can fill that love and that need for each other. Mata parataram nanyat kinchit asti dhananjaya mai sarvam idam protvam sutre mana ghana eva. O conqueror of wealth, Krishna tells Arjuna, you have conquered everything materially, but yet you still struggle to conquer the space of the heart. O conqueror of wealth and riches, conqueror of social media, Wall Street, TikTok, or whatever we've become masters of. There is no truth superior to me, that Bhagavan, that supreme source, that is the hub connecting every spoke of every single person. Everything rests upon me, Krishna tells Arjuna, as pearls are strung on a thread. And the beautiful analogy of pearls on a thread is that when you see a pearl necklace, you don't notice the string. It's hidden, but it's keeping everything together. Without it, you just have a pile of pearls rolling off in every direction. So if material relationships devoid of spiritual connection leads to frustration, then our connection to the divine becomes the linchpin for us to engage in healthy, dynamic, loving relationships with other people. The Vedic literatures describe that there are various ways of understanding and connecting to the divine absolute truth. Varanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmati paramati bhagavan iti shabdyate. One of the Vedic histories, the Bhagavad Purana, describes that there are three ways of understanding supreme absolute truth. One is as what is called Brahman, or all-pervading spirit. It's an energy that pervades everything and flows through everything. Then there is Paramatma, which literally means supreme spirit. And it refers to the idea that God exists in the heart of every living being as an ever-present inner guide that we can connect to through mindfulness and meditation. And there is Bhagavan, which we mentioned earlier, who is God as a supreme person, the supreme reciprocator of love. Akila Rasamrita Murti is a concise aphorism composed by the 16th century devotional poet, teacher, and philosopher Rupa Goswami, which refers to that Bhagavan God as the person capable of reciprocating with every flavor and experience of love in a person's heart and all of existence. So when we think about love as a basic need of the soul, according to the Gita, there needs to be a connection to the divine source in order for love to flow through us. This is where our spiritual foundations and perspectives come out in our personal relationships with other people. Other people are not my source of love. They were never meant to be. It was Juliet who spoke to Romeo, "You are the god of my idolatry." And somehow that idea of romance has taken precedence in modern culture. But we are not meant to complete each other as much as we are meant to complement each other as spiritual partners. When I got married, my wife and I had the fortune of having our spiritual teacher present at the wedding ceremony. And one of the things he said to us was that as long as we see each other as my wife or my husband, we're only seeing the person in relationship to myself. He looked at me and said, "Dayal, this is not your wife. This is a beloved child of God, a spark of divinity entrusted in your care." And she turned to me and said, "Mm-hmm." She didn't. But then he turned to her and said, "This is not Dayal, your husband. He is a beloved child of God, a spark of divinity entrusted in your care." And it's only when I forget that do I allow the four horsemen of the apocalypse to take over and fall into criticism or contemptuousness or defensiveness or straight up stonewalling. It's when I expect someone to be something for me that I'm actually responsible for on my own through my own spiritual connection that I become resentful towards my partner or my friends or my kids. It's only when I forget that other people aren't supposed to be my source of love, but my opportunity to practice love, that I become disappointed in my relationships. Bhakti, or the yoga of love, is a means of connecting to God, to ourselves, and to each other much more deeply by practicing love in our daily activities. The last verse of chapter 9 is considered to be the exact center of the Gita. The Gita has 18 chapters, so there's no middle chapter. There's the first 9 chapters and the remaining 9 chapters. So it's the last verse of chapter 9, which is considered to be the very exact center, like the heart of the Gita, like a gem where a special treasure is kept. And in that verse, Krishna speaks to Arjuna words that he will actually repeat in the end of the Gita in chapter 18. It's only one of 2 verses that he repeats twice in the entire book. He says, "Manmana bhava mad bhakto mad yaji mam namaskuru mam evaishyasi yuktvaivam atmanam mad parayanaha." Engage your mind. Engage that mind, Krishna tells Arjuna, that we talked about in a mood of devotion towards becoming completely absorbed in me as the divine source of love, my dear Arjuna, as your supreme best friend. Keep that connection strong, and all other connections will make more sense and develop greater meaning and purpose.